I've crept over to Adam's swim. Well, it's a swim now. It didn't used to be a swim. It used to be a hole in some bushes. But basically to pick his brains on long IQ hook links, because he's been using them to very good effect in the UK. First of all, mate, I wanted to know why you've changed over to such a long hook link and why IQ as well.
Well, I was just looking for an edge really, Dan. I was fishing down at Chilham last winter. I had a little bit of holiday to use up, and when I went down there, you know how busy and pressured it is.
Yep.
And you're always thinking of something different, aren't you, to try and get an edge. And with it being pressured and unusually gin clear, it went absolutely like tap water with some good weed growth. The visibility of my rigs and how they behaved was really important to me. So I got hold of some 10 pound IQ soft and some size 10 wide gapes and put them together, and overcame the mental block of, you know, really small hooks and light links, you know, and worrying about big carp in weed.
Yeah, because they're over 40 pounds, some of them, aren't they?
They are, mate, yeah. And, but I did some bench tests before I did, and it came through a flying colour, so I went down and put it to use, and as you can see from the rig, I mean, I tried to use as low a diameter and as long a link as I could to be totally different, and it gives me that invisibility and different sort of performance to any other rig that they're coming across on almost on an hourly basis. You know, they're coming across.
That's the key, isn't it? That's the key, is to just be different enough, not to be different for the sake of being different, to be different for a reason. So you've got lower diameter, lower visibility, not what they're used to coming across.
That's right.
And that's what's getting the bite. So talk us through it, you know, from end to end, how, you know, why you've done it the way you've done it and how you've actually tied it.
Okay. Well, this is a boilie version, as you can see. I've got an 18mm bottom bait on there. I start off by tying a loop in the end of the IQ,
right,
and threading on our smallest 0.5 silicone, about a 2mm long section, slide that down to the loop,
right,
and then thread the line through the eye of a size 10, or in this case a size 8 wide gape. So then what you've got the silicone trapping the hair in position,
right,
before
so
you start.
That's already round to that point then before you even start tying the knot. Okay.
Yeah, push it round to that point, and then obviously measure the length that you want for your length of your hair.
Right.
I mean, this is an 18mm bait, but I've been using it with smaller baits as well. So you set that, and then you start tying your knotless knot. But it's very important how you tie that, and I think a lot of people have problems with low diameter, light breaking strain mono links, don't they?
Definitely.
You always hear people saying, "Oh no, I just lost one. It went just my mono just broke by the eye of the hook," or and you do hear it sometimes. And I think you can get away with using light links like this if you use the right knots. And all I do is when I tie the knotless knot, the most important thing is to always, doesn't matter how well your hooks are finished, even with these wide gapes which are perfectly smooth, always start your knotless knot by whipping on the opposite side to where the closure is.
Right, so if the join of the hook's there, you go away from the join.
That's
effectively.
Right, exactly.
Right.
Start on the other side.
Right.
And then I'll whip down the shank of the hook in the normal knotless knot fashion, and what I do is, before I finish the knot and come back through, I do 2 turns around the outside of the barrel going back down.
Yep.
And then pass it through so it exits the front in the normal way. But what that does is, you know, if you tie normally a normal knotless knot and you pull it, it flexes and contracts, it moves, doesn't it?
Yeah.
And I think what happens is when you've got a long fight with a big fish, all the time that knot is moving across the eye of the hook, downturned eye, and I think that's probably what causes them to go. So
right.
These 2 turns around the outside, just those 2 turns there actually lock the knot solid.
Right, and so it can't do that.
Exactly.
Right, okay.
So when you pull it, you'll see it does not move at all.
Right.
So those 2 things I think allow you to use 10, 12, you know, low diameter links without any problems.
Excellent. And now, to the untrained eye, that's a pop-up. Right?
Yeah.
Because you've got an enormous bit of putty on there, nearly as big as the lead. So it's not a pop-up. I know it's not a pop-up because I've seen you fishing. What is that bit of putty there for? Well,
I started using it on a different rig, a short braided rig back in Oxford a couple of years ago, and started catching some tench and some big riggy carp that hadn't been caught for a long time, and I started using it just to try and pull the hook down and give a slightly different presentation, I suppose, and I still don't know why it works, but I know it does work. Right. And it now forms, whatever my bottom bait rigs are, I always have some on there just about 1.5 to 2 inches below the hook to pull it down, and to make it, I think it just makes it a little bit more difficult for them to deal with.
Right. Okay. And
So-
that, you know, to the untrained eye, again, if you're casting it out, the bloke next door thinks you're using pop-ups as well, which is a nice little bit of trickery as well. I like that.
It looks terrible with that long hair and so on. I mean, it looks absolutely awful. But again, I mean, long hairs is an important part of this rig.
Right.
Because a lot of people are tying their rigs with the bait touching the hook almost, aren't they?
Yep.
So get some separation, use a smaller hook, longer link, you know, and get a few things going.
Right.
And
so to basically give the hook more of a chance to catch hold because it's a little bit further away from the bait.
that's right, exactly.
Cool.
Exactly, yeah.
Okay. And why that length of hook link?
Again, I mean, it's just that the sort of average length seems to be about 6 inches or thereabouts. So I just took a number and doubled it, and come up with 12, and it's been working for me.
Right. Excellent. Okay. And the lead, yeah, I can see that's not a standard inline. So talk us through that.
Yeah, this is what I've done is I use an inline square pair, as light as I can get away with, 1.5 2 ounces, range dependent obviously, and put it on a safe zone leader. This is a gravel safe zone, but at Chilham I was using the weed and the silt safe zone colours to blend in better.
Right.
What I do is I take the insert out of the inline lead,
Right.
tap it out on a hard surface, and then mount 2 4mm safe zone beads onto the leader. And what they do is they butt down against the eye of the swivel,
Right.
and all it does, when you pull it back into the lead, it means that the ring is still free to rotate and move. Without those beads, the ring would actually jam in the
Yeah,
nose
it
of the
locks,
lead.
doesn't it?
It does.
Against the it stops the lead coming off the leader.
Yeah,
But no more than that.
that's right. Yeah,
Right.
and I like that movement, Dan. You know, it's I think particularly with stiff links and short links, it's critical. But even with a long link like this, I think it just gives it a bit of flexibility and helps it lie down flat and stops any arching and so on.
Right.
So yeah, those 2 beads in front there, inside the lead, and then something you put me onto there, which is a 4mm bead further up.
Just so that basically, as the fish moves off, bang, it hits that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
a little bit of a backstop. And I mean, I've been using it sort of on the first bit of tungsten or down like that, low behind. I'm not sure which one is best, but they both work well.
Right.
So
Excellent.
that's the rig.
Well, if you're going to get onto IQ hook links, then that's one to go for, definitely. Completely different from anything I've ever seen before, and probably completely different from anything you've seen before. Use it down your local pit and I'm sure you'll get bites on it. Come on, baby. Nailed that one. Gotcha! Excellent. Before we actually get the fish on the bank, you want to get everything prepared first. So the first thing I'm going to do is take my watch off. Just get that in your pocket and then roll your sleeves back as well. So you've got nothing, no material touching the fish, your watch is not scraping against the fish, and then get all your mat and everything ready. So I've got an Armo protector mat here. Basically that bit there is to kneel on, like that, and then that bit comes over there and the fish actually goes onto there. So I can actually roll that back. If the fish starts flapping around, I can roll it back and zip it up together. I've got my carp care kit, which I'm going to show you in a minute. If there's anything that needs attending on the fish, you want to be using one of those. I've also got my weighing crook, because there's big ones in here, so they're going to be hard to hold. And then also my scales as well. Get that all ready before you actually get the fish out of the water. I've got Adam at the moment, just tending to the fish in the net. Bucket of water as well. So lake water, not tap water. Don't ever pour tap water on them, always lake water. And then last but not least, your weigh sling. This is a new Traco Armour weigh sling. Very, very lightweight, but very, very strong as well. And I'm actually going to go to the edge with this and put the fish in it. So rather than taking the fish out of the water in the net, I'm going to take it out in this. It makes it much easier to carry them over and then put it straight onto the mat. So I'm going to do that now. Okay, son, I'm going to get in the edge because I've got waterproof shoes on.
Right then, mate.
And we'll just, cheers mate, let's get that the other side of me. Top. That's it. Right, so if you can, just take the arms out. Adam can take that away for me. It's just turning round. He's a big old deep fish, this one. Just roll the net up with the line out the edge of the net, like that. And we'll get that underneath him. Cheers, mate. Wants to fight now.
Put the arms in there as well.
Yeah.
Here, right there.
Yeah. Okay. Oh, it's heavy.
Heavy one, mate.
Right, our barbless hook has come out, so that's underneath his body. So I'm just going to lift him up, and I'll get Adam to take that out of the way. There's the. There you go. Good man. It's always good to have a mate around if you've got a big fish like this. He's just putting that rod out the way up against the bushes there. If you just take that net out the way for me, mate. Now I've already zeroed the scales, which means I've held the sling up wet on the scales and taken the scales back to zero. So whatever he goes is what he weighs. Mate, you're going to have to tell me what he goes. Just using that just to lever up, just take the fish just off the mat. What is he, mate?
Okay, he's going 37.6.
37.6. Oh, another below average carp from Amazon. It's mad, isn't it? Yeah. Absolutely mad. Right, we'll have a quick look at his mouth. See if there's any rips or tears, and then we can use the carp kit on that. Inside your carp care kit you've got two different liquids, one that says body and then one that says mouth. It's as simple as that. Get a few little cotton buds in there and literally just squeeze a little bit onto the end. It's like a gel onto the end there, and just where the hook mark was, you just dab that in, and that'll actually stick to his skin and stop any risk of it going septic, because we want to catch these beasts again and again and again. Get that out of the way. Thank you, Mr. Penning. Really important to keep them wet all the time. Right, if you want to get the camera, let's do some pictures, shall we? Right, when you're lifting a fish up, if you get your fingers round that fin there and round his anal fin as well, and pick him up and try and keep him nice and straight. It's a particularly difficult one to carry, this one, because he's a funny old shape. See there how he's flicking backwards and forwards? I've just rolled him back onto my forearms. Remember, I've rolled them up. Most people, they'd let go of them at this point. Just let them wriggle in your forearms, and then when he's calmed down a bit, you can hold him up nice and straight again. And Mr. Hamidi, oh, he's going to go again. As long as you keep him nice and low to the mat, if he wriggles like that and you roll him backwards, he'll be fine. Oh. Nice thing about these protector mats as well is they're full of polyballs, so the fish just sink into them. It's very difficult for them to wriggle off the mat. Oh, he's heavy. Oh. When you're picking them up for the pictures, make sure they're nice and flat to the camera, not rolled round like that, not tilting backwards like that. Nice and flat, so when you look down them, they're flat onto the camera like that, and that's how they're going to look best. I'm just resting me forearms on my knees just to take some of the weight off of this immense carp. What a result. And when you put him back, just hold him in the edge if you can. Just put your hand over the front of his face and just let him get his strength back. This is 37 pounds of head and belly, this one. He's going to be massive in the future, and he's just doing that with his body. He's got energy back. He's absolutely fine. Basically, the hotter the water, the more you're going to have to do this. In the cold water, there's more dissolved oxygen. The fish are in a healthier condition, and he's ready to go. Go on, my love. Nice to make your acquaintance. Pucker, that is fish care. I'm taking full advantage of this glorious spring weather we're having to talk you through the new Korda climate control suit. Now, first thing of all, it's 100% waterproof and 100% breathable, and there's nothing worse than wearing a suit where you're playing a fish and it's coming through and underneath you're wet anyway. And you'll notice during the film I'll be hoisting a few big uns up and you can see water being poured all over the trousers and it doesn't come through. So they're really good even if it's not raining to wear when you're doing your fish pictures. So to talk you through the features, we've got a nice wrap round Velcro bit at the bottom to bring them in nice and tight to stop them getting so muddy. There's a zip going all the way up to the knee so you can open them up and put them over the top of your Ski-Tex boots if that's the way you want to wear them. They're combat style so they don't look like normal fishing trousers, and they've got a nice pocket on each thigh for keeping your bits and pieces in. And then around here you've got a normal pocket, a lined pocket, and then a vent there, because when you're walking around in the suit you will get hot. If you leave the vent open, that's going to help some of the heat get out. And then onto the jacket, 3/4 length jacket, so it's got a good covering and it's got a zip that opens up at the bottom. That might seem like a little feature, but when you're sitting down, if that doesn't happen, all the jacket bunches up and it doesn't feel nice to sit down in. The zip itself has got Velcro all the way up it to keep the cold out when it's really cold. And then moving on to the pockets, they're side pockets rather than open at the top, because the ones open at the top fill up with water when you're standing out in the rain. So that's done on purpose. And then we've got 2 pockets on the inside there for keeping things like your Delkin receiver or your mobile phone in, and there's another pocket inside as well if you want to keep your phone nice and dry. And then we've got another pocket on the arm as well, because this is modelled on a mountaineering jacket, so you've got loads of different pockets for putting different pieces in. And then a nice high top on it, and then most importantly the hood. This is completely different from any hood on another fishing jacket because it's got a toggle at the back that you pull in so you can wear the hood like a peak cap. I've worn loads of hoods before that have got this metal rim on the front of them and they just fall down when you're playing a fish and you can't see what you're doing. This one, because of that little toggle, stays exactly where it is. And it's got nice discreet logos on it, so if you're not a Korda devotee you can still wear it. And then last but no means least, you've got Velcro on the arms so that when you're playing a fish the water's not getting down into your arms. There's nothing worse than it dribbling down your arms when you're playing a fish. So that's all the features on the suit. I'm going to get out of this inclement weather. I've enlisted the help of my lovely assistant here, Adam Penning, to show you the Tracker clothing bundle. First of all, you get the salopettes in it, which undo all the way up to the top, so it's really easy to get them on over the top of your trousers. They're 100% waterproof. In it as well, you get a polo shirt, and inside that jacket is a zip-in fleece as well that you can see there. All for the money. You get a beanie hat with it as well, and a baseball cap. 100% waterproof, really good value for money, really popular with carp anglers. So just to prove to you that both these suits are 100% waterproof, we're going to toggle up. Go on in, son. Oh. And there you have it, carp clothing.
Running straight off.
There we go, another big one, falls for the camouflage of a safe zone leader.
I've always really been into the technical side of carp fishing, especially rig camouflage, and I can remember years ago, before coating powders even came out, I used to paint my leads with Airfix paints to get them to match the lake bed where I was fishing. So naturally, when we started bringing out rig items, I made sure that they were in several different colours as well. First of all, the rig tube and the rubbers came out in green and brown, and then we brought the car key out a little while later. They proved to be extremely popular, and then the lead cores, when they came out in 3 colours as well. But it never brought it home to me more than when we started doing the underwater films. There you can see your very best rig just basically getting laughed at by the fish, and that's effectively forced us to get better and better at rig camouflage. And make no mistake, if the fish know they're being fished for, they are much harder to catch. And that's where Safe Zone came from. Basically, Safe Zone was like a buzzword for creating a safe area around your baited spot. So the rigs were blending in with the lake bed, so the fish just didn't know they were being fished for. Now the way we did that was we actually took samples of the lake bed and sent them to these people that manufacture the products, and they were getting like little Tupperware boxes full of goo in the bottom of them, bits of clay and gravel and weed and silt, and they were then matching the products exactly to those colours. So when we say something is a silty brown, it really is a silty brown. It's not just a nice brown that we've picked off of a colour chart. And the Safe Zone leaders was probably the first of those products to be done in that way. So rather than sending us, like I say, a green, a brown, a khaki colour, they'd send us 6 of each colour, and I'd drop little pieces on top of a Tupperware box full of silt until I got exactly the right brown, and that became the silty brown. And then since then, any of the new products like the anti-tangle sleeves and the hybrid lead clips, they've been done to match those colours exactly as well. So anything that comes out in the range from now on will be available in all the colours to match all those ones already. And then older products like the rubbers and that sort of stuff, we've now made them transparent. The same thing with the lead clips. So basically you get a little bit of light passing through them, and that's exactly the same as what happens with the Safe Zone leaders. They've got a 30-pound mono core, and then they've got a polyurethane coating on the outside with bits of tungsten actually melted onto them to drop them to the bottom. But most importantly, they're all slightly see-through. If you hold them up to the light, you can see the light coming through them. So not only are they almost the same colour as the lake bed you're dropping them on, they let a little bit of what the lake bed's showing through the leader, so it camouflages it even better. One common concern people have with the leaders is that their main line's biting into the leader and reducing the breaking strain. Well, that's not happening. Inside, as I've said, there's a 30-pound monofilament core, and the outside bit is just for colour. There's no strength to it whatsoever, and that's what your line's biting into, that polyurethane finish on the top of it. So if it is happening, don't worry about it. You're not ruining the leader at all. I'll use mine again and again and again, cut them off. If there's a little cut into that loop, I'll quite happily tie the line back onto it and fish with it with complete confidence. And all the metal items that we now do have all got a non-reflective finish on them as well. And again, that comes from the underwater films. We've seen every now and again there'll be one item of the rig which has got a tiny little glint to it. The fish will come into the swim, that glints in the sun, and the fish are away. So we've made a point of making everything non-reflective. And then hook link wise, well, we've had the IQ out for ages. The extra soft is out now. That's preferred by people who like a softer mono hook link, and underwater that is virtually invisible. It's available in 10 pounds breaking strain, which makes a really fine-tuned presentation, which Adam Penning loves, right up to 25 pounds, which is preferred by people like Leon Hugendijk, who's caught some massive fish from the continent on it. And then moving over to the hybrid, the coated material, that's available in 2 colours, a gravelly brown and a weedy green, and in the packet they look very, very similar. And that's the same with a lot of these products. In the shop, one's going to look very, very close to the other, but when you put them in the water, they look completely different. And that is the acid test. You've got to get your rig and drop it in the edge on something similar to what you're going to be casting onto. There's no good your rig blending in on a bit of gravel in the edge and then chucking it onto a bit of silt, because it's going to glow like a new penny. The khaki stuff's great on gravel, but terrible on dark coloured bottoms. So it really is up to you to get it exactly right for the different spots you're fishing. And sometimes I'll have 3 different coloured rigs on 3 completely different spots in the same swim on the same lake, and you need to put that into your own fishing if you're going to get the best from rig camouflage. I think hiding the main line is almost as important as hiding the rig. And in part 2 of the underwater series, we sent a diver out in the lake to film the lines, see what they look like underwater, and most importantly, see how much of them was lying along the bottom. Now, before he went out there, I would have said the last 10 yards of the mono, because it sinks, is always on the bottom. Well, that's not the case. And the reason for that is we all cast out, don't we? We sink the tip to sink the line, then we put the rod on the rest and put on a bobbin straight away, and that keeps the line so tight that it has no opportunity to sink to the bottom. So what you want to be doing is paying a bit more line off before you put a bobbin on and allow the line to sink, or better still, add a flying back lead to the line. Now, I've used flying back leads for years, but the thing that's always put me off them is that you can't take them on and off the line without cutting all the anti-tangle system off, re-threading all the tubing and doing everything again. So that's why I thought up the Safe Zone flying back lead. Now, it's a 2-part system. There's a plastic core that's got a split in it that you literally just clip on the line, and then the metal piece has got a split in it as well. You clip that on the line, push them together with the splits opposite, and then they can't come off. And it's available in 3 sizes, and that's because the heavier the flying back lead, the less distance it will come back. Now there's a parachute on the back of all of these which catches the air when you cast and pushes it back up the line. The heavier the flying back lead, the more effect it has on that parachute, slows it down so it doesn't come back so far. So the very small ones, perfect for when you're fishing in the edge up to about 50 yards out. At 50 yards it will probably fly back 10 yards. But if you cast that same rig with that same flying back lead on 100 yards, it will come back maybe 50 yards. So then you want to be swapping over to maybe a medium or a large size flying back lead. You can also take them off the line and turn them around the other way, so the bullet nose is facing the tubing rather than the parachute, and then they come back even less distance. And the rule with flying back leads is the further they are away from the lead before you cast, the further they'll come back on the cast. So if it's just sitting on top of a safe zone leader, it will come back the perfect distance. If you double that by putting it on top of a little bit of putty that's been moulded on the line, it will come back even further. So if you're fishing right in the edge and you want the flying back lead to come back a long way, put a little bit of putty a couple of feet above the anti-tangle system and it will fly back even further. And Ali Hamidi's thought up a good little use for these since we brought them out, is to use them actually as a back lead. So once you've cast out, let the line go slack, clip it on the plastic piece and then put the metal piece on as well and slide it down the line, and then you've got a little tiny flying back lead on the line, pinning the line to the bottom right under the rod tip. Now I actually prefer to use a standard back lead, that's the 1/2 ounce version. I like the really small back leads because I use very small bobbins, and what I'm worried about with a heavier back lead is moving the lead as I actually slide it down the line. Now these will only work if the bottom's really flat. So if you've got bars or anything between you and where you're fishing, or weed beds, there's no point using them because the line's going from the flying back lead over the weed bed and then back down to your rig. So it's not really doing you any favours. So in that situation, I'll just use a flying back lead. And with all these kinds of things like back leads and flying back leads and all the different colours of rig components that are now available to you, there's no excuse to make sure the fish have no idea they're being fished for.
Well, the rod I'm using here is a Dyer Infinity 12-foot 3 1/4, and even with size 10 hooks and 10-pound hook links which I've got on, it's absorbing every lunge of the fish perfectly. I thought they were a bit stiff to start with, but they're absolutely wonderful fish playing tools, even with light tackle. Just to prove that small hooks can catch big carp, there you go, 37 pound of pure muscle on a size 10 wide gate B. So even a small barbless hook, more than capable of taming brutes like this.
Hook choice is a very personal thing, and one pattern won't suit everybody and it won't suit every situation as well. So what I want to do now is talk you through the Korda range and explain the different features of each hook. Now all the hooks in the range are Teflon coated, which means they don't reflect the light as much as a normal hook, so they're harder for the fish to see. They don't rust as easily, and also they slip in easier because that Teflon coating is so silky smooth. So to talk you through the range, the first one is the long shank. That's without doubt the sharpest one in the range. A very long, very sharp straight point, a tiny little barb, a micro barb, and as the name suggests, a long shank, and also a downturned eye. And that downturned eye is to get the hook to flip over and catch hold in the fish's mouth when the hook link is tightened. And we've downturned it just 15 degrees so it will suit any hook link material. So you can tie it straight off with IQ or with any mono, and you can tie it with a coated hook link like a combi link, like hybrid, or with braid as well. But if you're going to use braid or a coated hook link where you're stripping a little bit away, add a little tiny bit of shrink tube to the eye just to curve it in more aggressively, and that will help the hook to turn over. And the basic rule of thumb is the more supple the hook link, the more the eye needs to be curved in. So for very, very stiff hook links like 20 or 25 pound IQ, you don't want the eye curved in that much, and that's why we haven't curved it in any more as standard. So it's versatile enough to be used with any hook link you want to use. And if you need to hook and hold, you want to be moving over to the long shank X. It's exactly the same pattern, but it's 1 wire gauge thicker for the size. So a size 8 long shank X is the same thickness as a size 6 long shank. And it's the hook that I use if I'm fishing the big French reservoirs. I'll put a size 4 long shank X on, and I know that I can bully a really big fish in snaggy conditions and it's not going to let me down. Now, people like Frank Warwick use the long shanks all the time because they flip over and catch hold a little bit faster than a short shank hook. You may have seen that I've used them to very good effect on the underwater films, particularly parts 5 and 6, where I took fish to nearly 40 pounds on the size 10, so you can see they're well strong enough, and if you just need to nick a very cute fish, that's the pattern to use. Now, the one situation I wouldn't use them in is if I was using a very, very short hook link. In part 6 I tried it and it didn't work. I lost a 30 pounder, and we knew it was 30 pound because we saw it on the underwater cameras picking it up. So if you're going to fish in that sort of situation, you need to use a short shank, and we've got something perfect for the job, a wide gape. The wide gape hook took an extremely long time to get right because the Japanese just couldn't get it how we wanted it. We wanted a beak pointed hook because when a beak pointed hook goes in, it curves in. So it's got a curve out to come out, which means it's the most secure pattern you can get. But we didn't want the point too beaked, because that means it's facing away from the flesh and it doesn't catch hold very quickly. And what we've eventually got hold of is the perfect combination of the two. Just a slightly curved in point, which is very, very secure once it goes in, but it's very, very sharp as well, and it nicks hold into the flesh really, really easily. So the wide gape is the finer wire of the two. It's the barbed version. It's got a slightly downturned eye, Teflon coated as always, and the size 8 is probably the most popular hook in the British marketplace today, and it's the one that I use most of the time. And the reason I use it most of the time is I want to know that once that hook has gone in, it's going to stay in, and when you're playing big fish in weedy conditions, you need something that you've got that much confidence in. And the barbless version is exactly the same pattern, still a very, very long, slightly curved point, obviously no barb, and heavier in the wire as well. And the reason I've made them heavier in the wire, there's no barb to get in the way, and if you've got a thicker wire, it's going to be slightly more secure. And that's the reason the only barbless hook we do has got a curved point, because it does curve in. And thinking back to last year's session where I fished the big lake at Maison, 10 bites, 10 fish in the net, and the biggest one was 57 pounds. So if your water's got a barbless rule, whether you're carp crunching and you want to use the size 10s and 12s in the barbless, or you're fishing for big uns like me and you're using size 6s and size 4s, I cannot recommend them strongly enough. There is one situation where I wouldn't use a wide gape hook, and that's if I was using a very stiff mono hook link like 25 pounds IQ. If you tie the hook on with a knotless knot, because it's kicking out of the eye at such an acute angle, you've got a short shank hook, a curved in point and a curved in eye, it just closes the gape of the hook up, and there's nothing available for the hook to catch hold of because it's closed up so much. So in that situation, I'd swap over to a long shank. The underwater films have taught me that there is no substitute for a really, really sharp hook, and if I'm fishing for really big fish, every one I catch, I change the hook as a matter of course. But in between times, I'll always test the hook, and this is the way to do it. Literally the point facing towards your nail, you literally just dink it along your nail. If it grabs hold like that, it's super sharp. If it skates across the top, the point is gone. And that can happen if you've just got fish moving around the swim, the rig can get moved around and the point could just be dinking on bits of gravel, or if you've got crayfish, they'll move the bait around and dink the point as well. Or just when you wind in, you can dink the point of the hook on a bit of gravel as you wind in, and then the hook is blunt. And that's the reason fish fall off. You get a fish halfway in, the hook hasn't got in properly, it shakes its head, and then the fish falls off. And if you lose a fish, you have to take responsibility for it, and 9 times out of 10 a fresh hook straight out of the packet would have landed you that carp. This is yet another fish that I've taken on the hybrid hook link. Join us in a second when I'm going to have a look through the hybrid range and how to get the very best from it. Before it came out, hybrid was probably the most eagerly awaited product that had been out for years, and since it's been out, it's probably the most misunderstood product or misused product for years as well. Now, the thing that makes it really, really good is the stiff outer coating. It's got a braided core and then a fluorocarbon impregnated outer coating, which makes it very, very stiff. And the idea is you strip some of the coating away so you've got a stiff hook link with a little soft bit at the end that the hook's attached to, so that the hook can lift up into the mouth easily, flip over and catch hold. And the stiffness of that coating makes it brilliant as what we call a combi link, a combination of materials, but it also makes it very difficult to tie. And that's the thing that people have problems with. They tie knots in it, they don't tighten the knot down properly, and then when you get a bite, the knot tightens by the fish and it cuts through the hook link and you end up losing the fish. And there is an easy way to get around that. Now if I show you the first hook link, this is my preferred way of doing it. Okay, it's a very short hook link, you'll notice, to start off with. And what I've done on this, I've used the new stripper tool to strip away the coating because it is on there pretty tough. So by using the stripper tool, it will come off in seconds and you don't fray the braid either. And those stripper tools are really good. Any coated hook link you've got, they'll take the coating off brilliantly. So I'll strip a little bit away and then I do my own special knot for tying the hook on, which is like a whipping knot. You basically form a big loop underneath the hook and then wrap that loop around the hook, first of all going up the hook, and then keep wrapping but going down the hook. And then there's a little tag end at the front of the hook that you pull tight and that tightens it all down. It's the same knot that you use for whipping eyes on rods. So once that's tied on, I tie on a little tiny micro rig ring. Tiny little one, I don't want it sliding around on the hook too much. And that serves two purposes. First of all, it allows the hair to come off the hook quite a long way up, close to the bend of the hook, which with a bottom bait like I'm using now, this is one of the mainline dumbbells, it makes the point of the hook really heavy, so the hook flips over and catches hold brilliantly. And the second reason is that that ring will slide out of the way as the hook penetrates, so there's nothing to stop the hook going in as far as possible. It's not for anti-ejection, I don't believe that works at all. And then down from that, you've got a little tiny bit of shrink tube. We've noticed from the underwater filming that too much shrink tube can actually get in the way of the hook catching hold. So I've got a lot less shrink tube on now. It's the new coloured shrink tube that's coming out in all the safe zone colours, and that should be available by the time this film actually gets into the tackle shops. A little tiny bit, and you see there, it's just taking the same sort of curve as the intern of the eye. I used to curve it in more aggressively than that, but having it almost straight like that actually makes the hook flip over and catch hold quicker. And then we've got the little bit of soft braid exposed, and then the coated section. And you'll see at the other end, what I've done in this instance is I've actually crimped a link loop onto it. It's a Witchwood carp crimp, and you need a special crimping tool that Witchwood do as well. And the reason I've started doing that is it's so much easier to do than tying a knot, and you can get the hook link exactly the right length. So all you do is feed the crimps are a double barrel crimp. So all you do is feed through one barrel, round through the link loop, through the other barrel, pull it up really tight so the two are really, really close together, and then using the crimping tool, you just squeeze it down and it's done. And if you pull that, that's actually stronger than any knot you can do because there's no knot there. Okay, now before I started doing that, I used to use a figure of 8 loop knot, so I'll show you that now. That's that one. Now this hybrid is rated at 20 pounds breaking strain, and the reason for that is if you tie a figure of 8 loop knot like that and do it properly, you'll get at least 20 pounds out of it. Now the actual material itself with no knots in it is 45 pounds breaking strain. So people say to me, oh, I've snapped it in the middle. Absolute rubbish, it's just not possible to do that. What's happened is they've tied a loop knot, they haven't tightened it down properly, and then it's snapped at the loop knot. That's what's happened. And all you have to do, you tie your simple figure of 8 loop, so make a big loop, twist one towards you, pull your baiting needle, so you pull one loop through the other, and pull it up tight, and that's where most people leave it, and that's what they're doing wrong. What you then do is hold it over a steaming kettle just to warm that plastic coating up, because if you make plastic hot, it goes softer. So you put it over the kettle, keep the tag end on it, and then take it out of the steam and then pull it really, really tight. And what you'll see happen, you'll see the knot close down on itself. And that means that it's as tight as possible and it's not going to move at all. And if you do that, you'll get 20 pounds breaking strain out of that figure of 8 loop knot. And then another option is, this is a knot showed to me by my very good friend Co from Holland. I think it's a Cub Scout knot or something. That's really, really easy to tie. It's literally a simple overhand knot, pull it tight against a little tiny metal bar, and then do a second overhand knot, pull that tight, but only sort of finger tight, not really, really tight. And then you hold the bar in between your hands and pull the hook link, and it just slips just a tiny amount and locks down, and that's locked in place. And that's extremely strong as well, that knot. Really, really easy to tie, no need to steam it, and very, very strong. And then the last way of doing it is to tie the knot that you would normally tie in your mono just to the eye of that link loop. Those link loops are really good. They're a teardrop shaped metal loop, and it's like having a loop on the end of the hook link, but obviously it's much harder wearing. Now there I've used a 4-turn half blood knot, and I've pulled it down as tight as I possibly can, and then held it over the steam, and then taken it back into my body and pulled it really tight, and you can see all the loops on that knot are all down close together. There's no way that knot can move, and that, believe it or not, is probably going to give you 25 pounds breaking strain. The loop knot is the weakest one of the lot. We rate that at 20 pounds. If you do that or a grinner, tie the knot and get it as tight as you possibly can, and then put it over the steam and then pull it even tighter. It will shrink down even more and you'll get absolutely no problems with it. Now if you're going to use hybrid all the way up to that link loop, or tie a little loop in it so there's going to be no break in it whatsoever, it's best suited to hard gravel bottoms or sandy bottoms, so that it'll all lie nice and flat on the bottom. Now if the lead starts to penetrate into the bottom, then the hybrid can give you problems, because the hook link is in the bottom, the bait's on the end, and it's sort of doing that out of the bottom. So what makes it brilliant on hard gravel bottoms actually works against you if it's weedy or silty, but there is a way around that. I'll show you this next one. Now this, believe it or not, is also the hybrid, exactly the same colour, but what I've done with this is I've got a black or a dark brown marker pen, and I've just flecked it down it and smudged that marker pen all up and down it so it suits more silty bottoms or more weedy bottoms. The most important thing at the end there's a break. So what I've done is I've stripped the coating away at the other end, and I've tied a simple grinner knot in the inner braid onto that link loop. So basically what can happen, if I hold it like that, you imagine the lead's attached to this bit here, all of that has gone into the soft bottom or into the weed, and that stiff bit is lying flat along the bottom. And I've actually added a little tiny bit of putty there, that's Gardner Critical Mass putty, to the hook link, just to hold it down flat. And because this has got a fluorocarbon coating to it, it's very heavy anyway, so it won't loop up off the bottom. If it's on a nice flat bottom, it will lie flat. But sometimes I add a little bit of extra putty just to be 100%, because with all the underwater films we've made, we've seen that the closer everything is to the lake bed, the more bites you're going to get. So that's the hook link side of it. What I'm going to talk you through now is my lead system. So that's basically it. Lead clip system, but with a twist. Again, from the underwater filming, I've seen that fish have been able to get away with a semi-fixed lead literally by shaking their head, and they're actually shaking the hook out of their mouth. And that caused me to use a lot more running rigs. And that's effectively what that is, because what I've done on the end there is I've cut off the ring swivel that goes on the end of the, comes on the end of the safe zone leader as standard. I've cut that off, and then I've just replaced it with a quick link. And then what I've done is I've squeezed the lead clip just a little bit, so when I pull that in, that's just in there under the tiniest amount of tension. Boom, that's out really, really quickly. So it's turned the rig from a semi-fixed rig into a running rig instantly. So as soon as the fish picks the rig up, realises something's wrong, shakes its head, that lead is then sliding away from the fish, and that makes it much harder for them to get rid of the hook. And then further down the leader there, I've put a little 4mm rubber bead, and that just gives it a bit of a jolt as the fish moves off. And the other thing it stops happening is the lead coming off the end of the leader and then ending up on top of the leader. So when you're playing the fish, you've got the whole leader like that with the lead on the top there. Having that bead on, basically, let's shake that down, stops it going past that point on the bite. It will still pull off if the line gets broken in during the fight and the fish is dragging the lead around, it will still pull off, because that bead during the fight has normally moved up to that sort of point there during the fight. So it does actually move, but it just stops the lead coming off the end of the leader when you get a take. If you don't actually use that bead, every time you get a fish in, the lead will be off the end of the leader, and it's just funny to play a fish on. So just to show you how to attach the hook link, I'm going to use the shortest one, which is the one that's got the bait on as well. It's the one I've crimped, and literally the link loop just attaches on like that. And then if I pull it inside the lead, you see there's no way that that hook link can get back out off that quick link there, because the join or the little arm that comes out is just inside the lead clip, just enough. And then when you get a bite, boom, that's pulling out straight away. And what I would do is finish that off with a little tiny long chuck stick, and I'll have one of these dumbbells on the end with my favourite tuna mix, or if I'm fishing a tiger nut, I'll have my favourite nut mix on the end as well. The only situation I wouldn't use this rig in is if it's weedy or snaggy. Then you need the lead clip to work as it was originally intended and actually eject the lead if it gets snagged up in something, and that won't happen with this rig. As soon as that's pulled out of there, the rig turns into a running rig, and there's no way that lead can get off the lead clip. So when it's clear bottom and there's not much for the fish to get caught up in, I'd use that rig, and I think it'll get you more bites. But if it's weedy or snaggy, use a lead clip as it was originally intended, and we are going to show you how to do that exactly right, because it's another thing that loads of people get wrong. Well, in all this freakish weather, we have just had the mother of all hailstorms. It's like someone's tipped about 200 gallons of slush puppy over me bivvy. I know I've got hands, I just can't actually feel them at the moment. And attached on the end here is a massive carp. This is without doubt the biggest one I've hooked. It's just tried to take me around a little island on the right hand side, and it's kited back out into open water, only because there's not enough depth of water, I think, for it to go around the island. I haven't got a clue where it is at the moment, and it is massive. Okay, baby. Got him! Come on! What a beast in horrendous weather. Right, I'll lift it, you read it, boys. Yeah.
2 bets.
Oh, it feels heavy.
It's a bit high, mate.
Come on.
52.6.
I'd go 52.8.
Right, 52.8.
52.8.
Excellent. How about that? Oh. 4 times I've been to Maison and 4 times I've had a 50. What a result. Right. We have just had the freakiest storm ever. Hailstones, the size of conkers, and this beastie went off just after it, 52.8. What a result in really, really difficult spring conditions that feels more like Siberia. What a beast. Felt big all the way in, rain lashing down, my hands were nearly falling off, they were so cold, and this was the prize at the end of it. Proper result. Yeah. And how about that for a bit of proof that that lead clip system that I adjust a little bit works, and the safe zone leaders and the hybrid too. 52.5 pounds of massive Maison mirror. What a beast. Before this product came out, I swore that I would never use it, but since it's come out, I have to admit I've used them more and more. It's called an extender stop, and I'll show you the first rig there. That was tied for 2 bits of plastic corn. My 12mm pop-up is ever so slightly bigger, so it won't fit on the hair, and by using the smallest size of extender stop, I've just lengthened the hair ever so slightly, and the rig's perfect again. And then going on to the next one, we all do it, you tie the hair too short, and then the bait's too close to the hook. And what I've done here is just using the extender stop just to pull that bait a little bit further away from the hook. And you can do that if you've tied up a hair for a 14mm bait and you want to go over to an 18mm bait. Rather than tying a new rig, just use the medium size extender stop and it takes the bait far enough away from the hook again. They're also really good for pellets. We didn't design them that way, but because they pull up inside the pellet, when the pellet goes soft, they stay on for longer because they're actually inside the pellet. We've all experienced the hair stop falling out because the pellet's gone soft. Not so with these. And they're also really good for luncheon meat or any soft bait at all. They stop the hair pulling through the bait, which means you can cast them further. And finally, they're really good at stopping the crays getting the bait off the hair. That's their little trick. They pull the hair stop off, pull the bait off the hair, and you wind in the morning, you've got no bait. Because these pull up inside the bait, the crays have got to eat the bait down to where the hair stop finishes, and then they can pull it off. And I've actually wound in half a bait in the morning, which could have got me a bite, which wouldn't have been on there if I'd been using a normal hair stop. There are 3 sizes of extender stop and a normal hair stop, and I'll have to admit it, they're in my box all the time because you never know when you're going to need them. Damien Clark back in the office would absolutely kill me if I didn't show you this. He spent ages getting this exactly right. I don't know if you remember the old Stuart float boxes, the long thin boxes, pretty much shaped like this. That's what Damien used to keep all his rigs in. But with the magic of injection moulding, he has made you the rig safe. Look at that, that's my one obviously, that's all my spare rigs in there. You can get like 75 rigs in it. I use the short ones end to end, like the double-ended side, and then the long ones on the other end there. Loads and loads of pins you get with it, nice little pins, and you can put them in those little compartments as well. And then it snaps up nice and tight, virtually indestructible. And then you've got a scale on the front there for measuring your rigs if you're that kind of a person. Let's put that one on there like that. That is about 4 inches, that one. So perfect little box for keeping your rigs in. They're not going to get wet, they're not going to get curly. Bang on. Being consistent with big fish is all about getting the technique right and using a good bait. And what we're going to show you when I've got this Maison beast in is the top quality boilie that I use in my fishing. Tell you a little bit about the history of it, and also some of the classic baits that are in the range and the new ones too. Without doubt, the most consistent anglers of any discipline are using good bait. And that's what we're here to talk about now, good bait, because there is a major difference between bad bait and good bait. To give you a bit of an insight into mainline, because that's the boilie that I've used for years, they're a bunch of Essex boys just like me, and they started their firm before I started Korda, and I was fishing a lake called the Grange, and a bait called the Grange came out, and it was called the Grange because it was field tested on that lake. And that particular bait turned anglers that normally get 1 or 2 fish a year out of that lake into 20 fish a year anglers. And they hadn't changed anything else that they were doing, it was just the bait they were on was so good. Naturally, I got straight onto it myself. It was rolled for us as well, which was a major step forward, because rolling your own bait is a tedious task and takes forever. But it was more the fact that it was catching so many fish. And ever since then, I've stuck on it, because any bait the boys have ever given me has done really well for me. On any lake, I've fished all over the world with this bait, and it has caught loads of fish on every single water. So to talk you through the range, this is how it all started. That is the Grange liquid. That's how it all started. And Mainline's theory on bait and their sort of process on bait is completely different to anybody else's. There aren't any strong flavours. There aren't any really potent attractors or anything else. Everything's very subtle, and it's nutrition and food based, which means when the fish eats it, it feels good for eating it, and then it wants to eat it again and again and again and again. And that's testament to any good bait. If it's catching the same fish over and over and over again, then it's a good bait, because the fish love eating it. So to talk you through, after the Grange came out, the next one was Activate, and that is legendary. If you've not heard of Activate, God knows where you've been for the last 10 years, but it's caught everything everywhere. Still a brilliant bait, gets forgotten a lot of time now because there are so many other ones that have come out afterwards. And the way these baits progress, it's not, they don't think let's do a savoury bait or let's do a sweet bait. As new ingredients come available to these guys, that's when a new bait comes out. So if they go from a sweet bait one year to the next new bait is a savoury one, it's because a great new ingredients come available that no one else can get hold of, and they put it into a bait and make a different bait. So every year, every couple of years, a new one comes out, but you can carry on using the old ones as long as you want. The Grange still catches loads of fish and people forget about it. And then next to Activate is Fusion. That's one that I hold very dear to my heart, because I won the British Championships on Fusion. Just from the second I started using it, I was catching straight away. Just absolutely superb bait. Again, I've taken it absolutely everywhere, from the big French reservoirs down to little tiny lakes spread all around England, and caught on it. And then the next one that came out was the Proactive Pineapple, and that was because the pineapple pop-ups that Mainline make are so popular with everybody. They said, can't you make a pineapple bottom bait? So they set about making the Proactive Pineapple. It tastes gorgeous. If you've ever eaten boilies, you can immediately tell when one tastes nice and one tastes horrible, and I eat more than that than I actually chuck in. And the most recent bait out is the Pulse, and the first time I used this, just put a single boilie on, whacked it out a million miles on my favourite syndicate, and had a 30 straight away, and that was with no bait going in the lake whatsoever. So food baits can also be very instant as well. They're very subtle smells and tastes, but the fish love them. You don't have to have something that's jumping out the bag at you to get a bite. So if we move back onto the Fusion, I can talk you through all the different things that are available with each bait, because it's not just boilies anymore. There are so many other things available, and this can be applied to any type of fishing. If you're fishing for big barbel or big chub or big bream or tench, everything loves this stuff. And that can sometimes work against you if you're a carp angler. You're catching nuisance species as well, but I'd rather catch 10 bream and 2 carp than no carp at all. So next to the actual boilies, they come in different sizes. You can get them in 12, 16, 18 and 20 mil. And then next to them, you've got the hook bait enhancement. Now you can use that in loads of different ways. One of the things that the guy said at Mainline to do, if you drill a little hole in the top of that bottle and put a baiting needle through and put some baits on it and then leave it in there all the time, it hardens the baits up and it actually draws into the baits over time. Now if you just leave them in there and they go really hard, you can't get a needle into them. So if you just keep putting them on the needle and leaving them in there, you can pull a bait on and it's got that little bit of extra zing to it. Now the other thing you can do is just pour it straight onto the bait or straight onto the pellets, or if you want to combine this with the dry mix, you can mix the two together on the bank just in a bait box and make a fresh paste instantly with it. So there's loads of stuff you can do. It goes in a solid PVA bag as well, it won't melt the PVA bag. So there's a million things you can do with the enhancement system. One of the mistakes I've made in the past on the underwater films is I've soaked the hook baits in the neat attractor. That neat attractor is what goes into the actual bait when you're making the boilies. On its own, I think it's too strong. We've actually seen fish on the underwater coming over the top of it and not taking it. Yet the baits that were just, you know, these ones straight out the bag, they are eaten with gusto. And that's another thing, if you look at any of the underwater films and watch the reaction from the fish to these baits, it tells you just how good they are. So that goes with the base mix. Really, really easy to make your own bait if you want to, and obviously it works out a little bit cheaper than buying the ready rolled ones. And then every single one gets its own pop-up. So rather than having to make your own pop-ups, they're done for you. Very buoyant, a mixture of sizes, and they smell very, very similar to the frozen bait. And then very, very recently, and these look like they're going to catch loads of fish, the dumbbells. Look really, really sexy, these ones. And they've done these in a special way where there's no preservative in them at all. So they're shelf life baits, but there is 0 preservative in them. That's how clever they are at making bait. And then next down to it, you've got the paste. Now you can use that and just mould it around the hook if you're fishing for smaller species, or you can mould it around a boilie to give it a bit of extra zing. Because when you boil something, you do lock a little bit inside it. If you put a bit of paste around the outside of the boilie, you're getting all that attraction plus the security of having a boilie on the inside. And then for every single one of these baits, you've got pellets with them as well. They're available in small bags and big bags. And if you chop up the baits and put some pellets with it, that makes a fantastic spod mix. So those are the different options available for each of the baits. I think they pretty much cover every single situation. And if you're not convinced by the underwater films that I've done, the articles that I've written and the TV stuff that we've done using Mainline, just look at anglers like Dave Lane. He's had 5 different English 50s on 5 different Mainline baits. And that's what I was saying earlier on, that I'd be happy to use any of the baits because they're all so good. Now one thing I must point out, the paste and the boilies both need to be frozen. They're fresh bait and they will go off if you don't refreeze them. So what I recommend you do at the start of the session, take them out of the plastic bag, put them into an air dry bag, use them during your session. If you don't use them all, chuck them back in the freezer in the air dry bag and you can use them again a couple more times. If you spend any amount of time carp fishing, you are going to get into making your own hook baits without a doubt. And once you start, there is no end to it because there are so many combinations that you can use. Now, if you're going to make your own pop-ups, that is the mix to use, the Polaris. You just mix it with eggs just like a normal boilie mix, chuck it in, roll it into balls, chuck it into the water and it floats straight away. Just boil it for a minute and you've got perfect pop-ups and they smell exactly the same as the flavour that you're putting in them. And one little tip with this, you can use like a 1 egg mix, or what I do is I just use the egg whites. So I use 2 egg whites rather than 1 full egg. And egg whites congeal quicker than a full egg will, so you don't have to boil them as longer. So rather than boiling it for a minute to make a hard boilie, you only have to boil them for 45 seconds. So just get rid of the egg yolk, use 2 whites, and then put the flavour into that. And flavours, well, the list of combinations is longer than my arm. You know, there are so many that you can choose from. I've just picked out a few classics for you. That's probably the most classic one of all time, pineapple juice. That's caught hundreds or thousands of carp all around the world. And what I do is I combine it with that one, with tangerine juice as well. And what I tend to do, I use more of the less powerful flavour. So the pineapple's a less powerful smell than the tangerine juice. So just to a 1 egg or 2 egg white mix, I'll use 4 ml of that and 2 ml of that. Now if you put that much flavour just into a 1 egg mix, remember the fish are not eating these baits, they're your hook baits. By the time they taste the full flavour, you've hooked them. But even so, you don't want them to be really bitter. So if you add a bit of sweet aid to it, that's like a really nice round tasting sweetener. You could use that just as a flavour on its own. A couple of ml of that in with the 6 ml of flavour, and that will give it a nice round taste. So when the fish picks it up, it doesn't spit it back out again because it's so harsh. A couple of the other real classics, sweet plum. That's one that used to catch loads and loads of fish, and hardly anybody uses that anymore for some crazy reason. That was one of the best ones I ever used when I first started making my own baits. And then a more recent one, Frutella. That smells like the sweets that you get in the shop. Absolutely superb. And then moving over to the other side, let's have a look. That's another one of the aids that actually triggers feeding as well as gives you the smell and taste. That peach aid with Scopex, that's a fantastic combination as well. And you can keep to the same thing. 4 of that, 2 of that, because that's a little bit more powerful flavour. 6 ml to 1 egg is more than enough. And then lastly, but by no means least, blackcurrant with Scopex as well. That's one of Frank Warwick's favourites, and I got into doing this stuff because I was fishing with Frank Warwick and he was out catching me 5 to 1 on his own little special hook baits. And every time I go fishing with him, he's got bags and bags and bags of them, like about 10 different bags of hook baits. And when you get into doing this, I'm sure you'll be the same. Colour wise, there's loads in the range. They're my 2 favourites, orange and yellow. They just seem to get more bites than anything else. But there's dark colours as well, and sometimes everyone's using very bright pop-ups, try using really dark ones with the same flavours in them, but dark ones. So these are my own specials, and I've put those ones in. That's a weird old smell. That's like a fishy flavour with pineapple in it as well. So you don't have to go with what you think is right. Combine 2 that are completely different and see how they work. And then the next one, these are my own pineapple ones with a little bit of tangy flavour in as well, so they're really, really citrusy. And if you've had them for a while, once I've boiled them, I dry them out for a couple of days, and once that initial moisture's gone out of the bait, they won't go off at all. And don't be afraid to put a couple more drops of flavour on every now and again just to boost them up, and they'll just draw into that porous mix and they'll smell brand new again. Now, they are lovely. And another really good little tip, right, they're the same. They're pineapple with a tangy flavour in there as well to give them a real citrusy smell, but they're bottom baits. So I've made these with just a 50-50 base mix, and they just sink just like any other bait. Everybody seems to use high vis, high attract pop-ups. These are high vis, high attract bottom baits, because if fish are swimming around and every single one that's off the bottom has got something wrong with it, the fish can be wary of it. So if the others have been used to death, try a bottom bait. Very few people take the effort to do a 1 egg mix of bottom baits, and they've caught me a hell of a lot of fish. Now if you can't be bothered to make your own, there are loads in the high vis range that Mainline do. That's the Frutella. Pink's a really, really good colour, one of Frank's favourites as well. And there's loads of others in the range, there's loads of flavours as well, and it's only limited by your own imagination. Certain lakes respond to different flavours, so just keep trying, you'll find one that is better than anything else. Well, that's it for boilies. One last tip, days like today when it's really high pressure, Sky Lake's quite deep, I'm going to start fishing hook links about that long, popped up off the bottom. So I'll use one of these high vis pop-ups and I'll shave a little bit off it so it's a tiny, tiny little bait, and you can snare some fish that are just drifting around enjoying the sun when a bottom bait won't work. What we're going to have a look at now is particles, because I use particles all the time in my fishing. You see, I've always spodded in the TV shows. We're going to show you the spod mixes and show you different particles and how to put them together, and also show you some pellets as well. And then after that, we're going to go on to PVA and method feeders.